Siobhan.
And she, they, just like me.
For real.
Hey, girl.
Hey, girl. This is a rough one. I'm just going to say it right off the bat. I mean, I'm sure you've seen the title. This one is not going to be a fun episode, but...
Look, we'll make it fun. That's the she, they, just like me for real guarantee.
I'm hopeful, at least.
Yeah, I'm just trying to stay optimistic. It's going to be a rough one, though. We're talking about Envy and Desire by your girl, Amy Armstrong.
Amy, thank you so much for listening to this podcast, because we know you're listening.
Yes.
Before you say it, yes, I know I'm very clocky, and I'm HEP, and all this stuff, whatever.
I'm sorry, I'm not the exact picture of what you want trans representation to be. I'm so sorry. I'll try better next time. Yeah. Is that okay?
I gotta say, her eyebrows look fucking great. She's got a really cunty contour, and good job.
You do not, in fact, have to hand it to Amy Armstrong.
Well, credit where credit's due. You look great, doll. Truly. Anyway.
Certainly. With that out of the way, gosh. This came up on my timeline a few months ago. Someone was dunking on it, surprisingly. Went to look it up and was surprised that, it's just on YouTube in full. I can watch it right now. And I did, right then and there.
Yeah.
And it ruined my mood for days. And I'm not alone in that. I've learned it had a very similar effect on you, unfortunately.
Yeah, it did. I did not watch it when the original hubbub was all over my Twitter timeline because I knew it was going to be bad, but we were going to do it for the podcast, and I was like, okay, I'll watch it for this, and it did actually make me very depressed for days, and I'm just coming out of that now. So, thank you. That was great. For the uninitiated, let's start with this. Who is Amy Armstrong, or Basic Chanel on Twitter?
She fancies herself a provocateur. That's even in her Instagram handle, Aging Provocateur on IG. I think people think of her as sort of a professional troll, which I guess is probably the same thing as a provocateur, but less kind. Other than that... she is a commentator of sorts. She wrote and directed this short film, Envy and Desire. Other than that, I honestly don't know what she does besides post too much. If it's not evident from the film, spending time on her Twitter, very chronically online. I've seen that in reviews of the film, and boy howdy, that is a very fair and apt description, I would say. But that's all I know. Other than that, this Amy Armstrong is an enigma that totally just eludes me.
What does she do even?
What do you even do?
Yeah, I mean, trans girls online, I have an idea of what they do. They're a musician. They're, a journalist or something. And I think Amy is just a troll. And, I'm all for, having a private life. Don't share your business if you don't have to. But,
Oh, sure. But besides that, really, in my opinion, what happens when you consciously close yourself off from community because all she does is dunk on people all day. There was a period where, and I'll say this, I was trying to keep it limited because I did not want to go down too deep of a rabbit hole looking through her tweets. There was a time period where she was obsessed with a new Taylor Swift album, but I mean, who amongst us wasn't, Siobhan? Can you blame her?
That's true. It was fire, I will say.
Sure. But besides that, not a lot of joy on the timeline. A lot of trolling, a lot of dunking on really mainly just other trans women, which I find it very interesting when, with a focal point of an entire political party's agenda, and even some of the other parties' agenda as well. And instead of pointing out the bigotry in the country and the people who are really the problem, let's just dunk on other trans women who are going through enough. Like,
yeah,
I don't understand the agenda here. I don't understand the motive. What's your take on who is Aimee Armstrong?
I don't know if she spent a lot of time on 4chan, but it gives me this vibe like she's like a TTT girl, you know, like a 4chan trans. And, you know, I think she spends a lot of time cringing at other trans women and trying to differentiate herself from them. Some of the people she goes after are not great people necessarily, but she also, like, calls other trans women men, which, like, to me is, like, that's, like, off limits. You know what I mean? Like, even if you're, like, the worst person alive, like misgendering someone is just fucked up and like uncalled for. You know what I mean?
One example I saw that was particularly egregious was that she tweeted out a picture of nominal Naomi with her breast pump. Naomi's a trans woman and she does debates on TikTok. Do you remember there was like a big hubbub about this for whatever reason?
I do remember that. Yeah. And that girl's lovely, by the way. Like, I follow her. She's great.
And the caption reads, Happy Father's Day. And then I saw another tweet where she just outright misgenders Naomi. I have no idea what her issue with her is, but misgendering is totally uncalled for. There was another tweet with a trans lesbian therapist who has facial hair. And she's talking about how beautiful sapphic relationships are. And the caption is, people on Twitter are like, get help, go to therapy, and then these are the therapists. Even just as earlier this week, she's really honed in on Lily Tino, who is a food and restaurant reviewer, primarily. I remember she kind of came on my radar when a video was circulating of her outside at a restaurant, and servers were coming up to her, misgendering her, and she was correcting the servers, and people were dunking on her because of her appearance and that she should, I guess, expect to be misgendered because she doesn't quote unquote pass as well as people would like her to, I guess. Basically what I'm getting from Aimee is she cares very much about optics to a very harmful degree. I don't want to put words in her mouth, but from how it looks to me, she believes that the trans community should be represented by skinny, super passing women, primarily, and anybody that doesn't fit, which again, coincidentally, just happens to be Aimee. Anybody that doesn't look like that should basically hide themselves away from public view entirely because Aimee thinks that anyone who doesn't look like her representing the community gives us a bad image. I've heard that there are some valid critiques of Lily Tino, but basically all of it comes down to, for her, like this tweet, Lily Tino is 29 years old, eat well and responsibly, or you will age horribly. They're all appearance-based.
Yeah.
The most recent thing that everyone's dunking on is that she was talking about bottom surgery at Disneyland, but she was using, like, food analogies, so she wasn't even being, like, clinical about it, but everyone was dunking on her because, oh my god, children are there, and she's talking about genitals, and it's like...
Do you think kids at Disney World are, like, keyed in on what an adult sitting by themselves is talking about?
Talking about cake pops? Like, no, they don't know what the fuck she's talking about.
No, it's just like engagement farming, I feel like. And, you know, her fans are especially bad too. Like, if you scroll down on like any of her posts with replies, as far as like the muted words thing of like, you know,
the tweet said, you can never escape it, and the words muted are Truscum, transmedicalism, transgender, trans, and TERF.
Wanting to like get away from like the community and things like that. I think like if that's what someone's decision is, that's fine. But like, I don't really buy it with Aimee because it's like all she tweets about is like trans stuff. So it's like she's not even trying to like actually get away from it. She's just trying to like wall herself off from anything that is not like something she's curating. You know what I mean? Like she wants to curate a very specific kind of trans community.
And she's extremely fatphobic. There's a video going around of Troye Sivan dancing on stage, and someone was like, oh, y'all like Troye Sivan because he's skinny, but y'all shit on Sam Smith because they're, like, fat or whatever. And Amy was like, yeah. Like, she posted that cartoon of just, like, the side profile, yes. And then posts this, which, if you've been on the fence about Amy up to this point, I'm just going to read this verbatim. I'm surprised conservatives focus their hate on Sam Smith rather than Troye Sivan. Troy makes gayness sexy, cool, aspirational. Sam Smith, on the other hand, makes being gay hideous and repugnant. Something to avoid. She then says he, misgendering, is basically a walking conversion therapy machine.
I have one mutual who follows her, and then other people that I follow her, but that's whatever. But there's like, I have one mutual that follows her. So I reached out to this woman and I was like, can I just like ask you like what you like see in her? Like why you follow her? Like what's up with this? Like not like follow policing, like follow whoever you want. I don't care about that. She actually does not like Amy anymore. Like early on, she was like nicer. She like defended this woman from dog piles and things like that. But now that like she's a star and has like a big ego about things, my mutual does not really like her anymore and is trying to be like a better person and like move away from that. But, you know, all that said, like I'm also all for like, you know, campy, bitchy humor, a little irreverent and things like that. It's just that I think that Amy takes it too far, honestly. I think she does it like very clumsily. It's not my vibe.
I wouldn't consider anything Amy does as camp. I saw a review of the movie saying, this movie is pure camp and some of y'all just don't get it. I wouldn't consider it camp, but we'll get to the movie itself.
Okay.
Earlier when we were saying that she's a troll, I use that term very loosely because I don't think she does it very well. Like, being a troll and then skating responsibility, like she's done that a couple times. Like she posted this one tweet and then said, there are some things I posted on here that I don't feel good about. I've been mean about people's appearance and made fun of people in a mean girl way. I haven't done it in a while, but it was unclassy and kind of cringe, and I'm sorry for it. She posted that a month ago, and then exactly a month to the date started shitting on Lily. So it's like, I don't know. I can only really take that with a grain of salt because she's done a few apology tweets, and they're all very like, tee-hee guys, y'all know I'm not serious, but I have to do this for appearances. And it's like, what appearances? Like, your audience is awful. Like, you don't have like good faith people following you. So I don't know who you're trying to like wink to. Like, everyone's in on the gag. Everyone knows what this is about.
I would like to move on from the person, Amy, and maybe we can get into the film that she made. So I think of this film as basically a shitpost through the medium of cinema. It's short. The audio mixing is fucking horrible. It does not look good. But it doesn't have to, because like it's also not very well performed. But that's, you know, I'm willing to look past a lot of those things, right? Like I actually really do like, you know, low budget films made by like people who are like DIYing it. You know what I mean? I mean, my girlfriend Valeria is a filmmaker, and her film Part-Time Killer, now available on Amazon, is a full-length film, and it's like about comparable in terms of like scope and budget, but it's a feature-length film. It looks way better. There are some moments that the audio mixing isn't great, but for the most part, it at least clears. You know what I mean? There's much more like craft and effort and love put into it. And it's much better. And it comes across as being very wholesome, like an expression of like, you know, a vision, right? Where like Envy and Desire, on the other hand, is like, there's like a few moments that are interesting. There's like some things to talk about, but like for the most part, it is a shit post in the form of a film. I also do think it's camp. I think there's a lot of parts of this film that are actually, they kind of remind me of like pink flamingos. Like, you ever seen pink flamingos?
I saw people making John Waters comparisons, and I thought they were being way too charitable, but I see what you mean.
Yeah, it's about people being shitty and horrible, and it looks terrible. Like, you know, there are parts of it that are ironic, or they're meant to be funny, or like a parody. And I think one of the reasons personally why this film affects me as much as it does is because I'm still in my first year of transition. While it might be funny to someone who can, like, you know, super pass and like lives in Brooklyn and, you know, is like relatively well off and rich, that's not me. You know, I'm working class. I live in Texas. I'm trying to figure it out as best I can. And it was just hurtful to me. It didn't make me laugh. It was too close to home.
I didn't laugh once. No. That's why, like, there were points in the movie where I could tell it was trying to be funny, but none of the jokes landed. And I'm going to ask you a question here before we get into it.
Okay.
Do you think the intention was for, at any point, us to not like the two women in the film, or are we supposed to side with them 100% of the time?
There were moments where Bella's character was presented sympathetically, but still, I don't think either character is particularly sympathetic. And, I mean, Ethan definitely is not.
Did you not agree or side with Ethan at any point in the film?
No, I think Ethan is meant to represent people who are, like, genuinely fetishistic, but also early transitioners at the same time, which is something that I don't really like, because it's like, I'm not a fetishist. You know what I mean? Like, I'm learning, you know, I have a lot to learn. I'm trying my best, but, like, you know, I'm not a fetishist. And I think that, like, even a subtle comparison is, like, offensive to me.
I figured we would read most of the reviews at the end, but there was one review and an Amy response to the review that might be worth reading up front. And I'm just going to read this as is because it is pretty heavy. Content warning, mention of suicide and suicide ideation. Was told people were talking about this film because it was genuinely offensive, and in that regard, I was not disappointed. I'm not joking when I say that I think if you would have shown me this at the right time in my life, I would have killed myself. Regardless of intent, identity of the creators, or the layers of meta-irony they were on, the whole thing is bathed in this kind of trans-misogyny that only specific kind of terminally online trans femmes themselves have the experiential and subcultural knowledge to perpetuate. The whole thing reeks of TTTT, as you said earlier.
Yeah.
Admittedly guffawed several times at the various cunty deliveries of AGP, but spent most of the watch with my hand over my mouth and a mix of shock and horror. Candidly, I find myself a little impressed, but not in the way I would advise others else to seek watching this. P.S. Screenshotting people's critiques of your shitty, mean-spirited movie and posting them on your Twitter is cringe. Lighting and sound sucked too.
Real.
And Amy's response here is what I really wanted to highlight because I think it shades the whole film.
Okay.
I know y'all think I love drama or whatever. The idea that something I created could make someone feel like they'd commit suicide makes me so beyond sad. I view Ethan as so absurd that the idea that anyone could see themselves in him is crazy to me. The character is nothing to do with being clocky, baby tran, or transbian. He's a caricature and absurd allegory of the kind of awful men we as trans women deal with while dating. The kind of person who utters things like trans women are women while treating us like less than humans. People keep bringing up Buffalo Bill in regard to this, saying I'm using the same get out of jail free card that the males of the character did. Firstly, Ethan is not a murderer. He's just a bad boyfriend who behaves terribly, but I reject the idea that that's an evil, dangerous demonization. Even if Ethan was a potential trans woman, it doesn't change the fact that he exploits Bella. It's wrong, but I find it bizarre that you can, in turn, take this to mean that this was my view of all trans women when there's literally 2 other trans women in the movie, parentheses, who according to some reviews are also clocky. I know everything I say will be taken in bad faith and you'll continue to label it as fascist, but I want to reiterate for any people interested in any semblance of good faith. This is not about transbians or clocky trans girls. I'm not attacking you, and if anything in the movie made you feel upset and you want to talk about it, my DMs are open. The film opens with this, TikTok thing to present that Bella is a person on TikTok and her boyfriend is, inattentive.
Yeah.
There's this video where a commenter suggests that Ethan is gay for dating a trans woman, and when she's filming it, Ethan is, just playing video games, not really paying attention, and that's supposed to be the introduction of the 2 characters. After this, Bella meets Natasha at a diner. They overhear a waiter trying to pick up a customer and immediately start speculating that he's a chaser, even though you don't see the customer that he's talking to. But Natasha then makes fun of Bella because her boyfriend Ethan, quote, follows all the dolls on the gram. This then cuts to Bella saying that, oh, well, he's not a chaser, but he did say this really weird thing the other day. It's a flashback scene to when Ethan is talking about how when it comes to sex to him, it's parts envy and desire.
He's AGP. What? AGP, autogynephilia.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Autogynephilia, a man's love of himself as a woman.
We come home and Ethan is watching something we learn, I guess, at one point is supposed to be Sissy Hypno. We find that out later. But he acts like he's not doing anything, and that's when Bella asks offhandedly if he's seen her estrogen pills. And if this is a reference to the Reddit post you mentioned.
Yeah.
But it's kind of glazed over here that he may have taken some of them or whatever. Then there's this interpolation, this representation of Sissy Hypno that they create for the film. Immediately, Bella is 100% now convinced that Ethan is quote-unquote AGP after just having learned about it.
Right.
Then we get this montage of Ethan at home trying on Bella's clothes to a Slater song that I don't know how they cleared. She's calling him a sick fuck and everything. Ethan says, I'm feeling vulnerable right now. Can you be a little less hostile? I was 100% with Ethan on this. I think she is being hostile.
Yeah.
As a trans woman herself, seeing someone exploring their sexuality, it is a weird reaction.
Yeah, I mean, okay, I do agree with that, but I will say that, in the film, he did steal her estrogen pills, and he is watching, really, really cringe, Sissy Hypno with, racial elements to it.
The fact that the movie does take a point to reference how incredibly racist Sissy Hypno usually is, good on the film for that. It's one of the very few things I think it does well.
Yeah, but also, on that note, and we've talked about this on the podcast before, but I know trans women who, have confided in me that at a point before their transition, they were into that stuff, not necessarily the racial stuff, as a means of, exploring that desire, which I think, if you do it, by yourself and you're not looking at the cringe racist shit and it's just a way for you to crack your egg, I think that that's okay. I do think that Ethan is being a bad person in this exact place, and also hiding behind oh, but I'm being vulnerable right now is a cop-out. Personally, that's my take on that. Not to say that, you can't be a vulnerable man. Of course you can, but yeah.
I think it's fair. I think a lot of Ethan's dialogue is written and delivered in a way that we're supposed to hate him, so even if he's saying real shit, we're supposed to think it's bullshit. I'm just looking at it from an outsider perspective of how she reacted and saying that it's vulnerable, you're being hostile. The fact that it was based on a Reddit post about stealing estrogen, if that was more of a plot point, I think Ethan would be clearly the villain in this. But I think that that it's just kind of implied and glossed over. That it's not as big of a plot point as he's just wearing her clothes and filming a thing and she flies off the handle. Like, that's what she's reacting more to. Like, she's not really reacting to the estrogen pills. She's more or less reacting to him dancing and filming himself.
If I was dating a man that I lived with and I found him wearing my clothes and filming himself, that would be a very trying moment for me. I do kind of get what you're saying where, like, I don't know. I guess it's also different, too, because I'm bisexual. So, like, if I was dating a cis man who ended up becoming a trans woman, that would not be as big of a deal for me than if you were like a straight trans woman. You know what I mean? But yeah, let's go ahead and continue with the synopsis, I think.
Ethan is saying that like he's very envious of when Bella and Natasha hang out together. So Ethan joins them for a cunty doll brunch. If you read the reviews, people love this saying, and that comes up a lot. It's like entered people's vernacular because of this film.
I mean, I said it today on Twitter, I will admit. I was like, wow, this is
God
a cunty doll brunch. I hate to keep handing it to Amy, but that's pretty fucking good. Like, I like the cunty doll brunch. I'm sorry, it's funny.
Fine.
This scene is horrible.
Fine.
This scene is horrible, but that phrase is really funny.
Okay. I will say...
Moth, you don't want to go to a cunty doll brunch with me?
No, I absolutely do.
Yes.
It's the context, Siobhan. It's the context. Okay. Anything remotely said that's funny in this film is negated immediately because you can't be funny in this.
Oh my God.
It's not going to work with me. I saw other people bringing up the two's a company, three's a clock. It's a decent line, but in this film, I'm not going to let it pass.
Two is company, three. That is a funny line. Okay, I'm sorry. I keep handing it to Amy, but
I know she can barely even hold all the things are handing to her right now. She's dropping them all over the place.
Much like Trump.
Okay.
Much like Donald J. Trump.
Whoa.
She is very funny. And I'm sorry, like, you know, politics aside, like, shitty person aside, she's funny, okay?
So Ethan is acting exactly how the two girls were acting earlier when it was just the two of them, even down to using the same vernacular and talking about the same things. Like, he speculates about the sexuality of a waiter just like they were speculating about the sexuality of a waiter earlier.
Yeah, it's literally paralleled.
They're embarrassed, but he's only following by their example. So I think ultimately... it's innocent and harmless what he's doing here, but the film presents it in we're supposed to just absolutely be cringing because Amy cringes at anyone who doesn't look passable acting in this way. So we're supposed to hate this and we're supposed to feel the way they feel.
Well, I will say it is very cringy, and this scene hurt me because I have been the babyest tran at a a meeting of like trans women, and I felt like I was this. You know what I mean?
Right, same.
Yeah. But like, you know, I guess the difference is that Ethan is being very like over the top and like in everyone's face and things like that, where I was very reserved. Because I did not want to like draw attention to myself, and I wanted to just like listen to like these women who've been doing it for longer than me talk, you know, and I wanted to like, you know, I added things where I could, but I still very much felt like I was this, you know what I mean? This scene was very rough for me for that. It was very cringy, but in a way that like hurt me very deeply.
I'm in the exact same boat. This scene hurts a lot, and we've had kind of discussions about it a little bit, but there have been a lot of times when I've been very critical of myself and how I present myself on Twitter for a while there, before I kind of like found outfits that I was very confident in. I was worried that I was presenting myself as like too cartoony, potentially raising a flag of like it being a fetish, and that became a real worry for me. Like, I had already been on hormones for over a year, but those doubts still creep in every so often of like, you know, are you doing this for the right reasons? Even something as simple as like playfully using bimbo around as a joke, like that became something I was very conscious about. Like, should I be saying this? Like, even if it's like around the company of other trans women who know the bit, like they know what's going on. They know it's just like harmless self-expression.
Yeah.
It became something I was very self-conscious of. To see it played for laughs and for us to not supposed to like him at all in this scenario. The film is very bad in a lot of different reasons, in a lot of different ways, and ultimately, one reason I think it's very bad is because its message is very muddy. It's very unclear if he is just a fetishist or if he's cracking his egg here until like the very, very end of the film. To the point where we even see like this shot of when Ethan leaves, we're like left with a crying, reflective Bella. Like, that almost kind of makes you think, was she in the wrong? But like up to that point, like I was, because the writing is so bad, confused myself as to what they were actually going for here.
Well, yeah, and I think that's like the biggest criticism of the film beyond like, well, no, the biggest criticism of the film is that like the editing is the editing and the shot composition and the way the film reads are not clear. So like I could actually see like a film like this, like that characterizes Ethan more clearly so that baby trans do not actually identify with him like they do, being very good, you know? But it's just like there's like all these scenes where it's like, you know, he's supposed to be watching Sissy Hypno in this scene, but we don't even really get that. That's not clear. You know what I mean?
He was sitting there watching a thing on a laptop or whatever. Like, he wasn't like jerking off or anything. He was just sitting there like he was like looking at something on Twitter real quick.
Right, yeah. Like, you know, you should have like an establishing shot where it's like he's wanking it and there's like the worst fucking Sissy Hypno you've ever seen. And then it's like she comes in and then it like cuts to just like the view from the door and she comes in and like he freaks out. You know what I mean? Like, think about the actual shots and how it's being put together more. So it reads, right? It doesn't read like this.
No, it's very confusing and fuzzy.
Yeah.
And I 100% believe the part where the waiter calls Ethan sir and Ethan corrects the waiter is a dig at Lily. Like, how can it not be?
Yeah.
Then when Ethan gets up to use the bathroom, they make it very clear and obvious how loud Ethan is walking to the bathroom in the heels. Which, again, how would you not think that this could be offensive and harmful towards people who are earlier in their transition, who are very self-conscious about every fucking little thing we do?
Yeah, and walking softly in heels takes fucking time. I'm still getting the hang of it. You know what I mean? It's not easy. And to characterize someone so horribly and then to give them these traits that like a lot of baby trans like myself like are very self-conscious about, I think it's unconscionable, you know? It's just a difficult piece of art. I'll say that. We've talked about the end of the film where like after the cunty doll brunch, Bella and Ethan go back and they like, Ethan like wants to hook up with her and she's like, why don't you take all this off and just be you? And he's like, well, this is me. And then he says something like, oh, well, that's my like gender euphoria boner or whatever. That's rough because it's like, again, as like a baby trans person, like, I'm not saying like when I put on feminine clothes for the first time, I had a fucking raging boner. I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is that, like, my sex life got a lot better because I did feel like I was finally able to engage with it as myself. And to parody it like this and to be clumsy about it is bad.
Especially when they establish earlier in the film that Ethan is not interested sexually.
Yeah.
And now he is. Like, we're just supposed to ignore that? Like, that's development.
Yeah, it unfortunately reads too much like he's an egg. And like I'm saying, like, if you, like, we on this podcast have talked about how we do not like and do not associate with people who consider themselves sissies. We are not those kind of girls, okay? People can do what they want. I don't want to be associated with that. I think that that's offensive to me if someone were to bring that to me. But this film does not automatically read like Ethan is a sissy. It reads like very muddled that he is a sissy and also a clocky or baby trans person. You know what I mean?
Ethan tries coming on to Bella, but she wants him to take the wig and heels off. Ethan says, if you don't like these, you don't like me. Bella worries that Ethan doesn't really like her, but Ethan says that he loves her. At what point were we supposed to not think that, like, that's not established either, that he doesn't see her as a woman? And when Ethan says that he loves her, like, I believe it. Like, he says it very heartfelt, so it's like, okay, I still don't see what's wrong here. When Bella says that Ethan doesn't see her as a woman, Ethan says trans women are women with a comedic zoom in to where I guess we're supposed to think that's bullshit or whatever when he says it, because, like, the way he says it, I guess. Bella points out Ethan's erection, which he explains as a euphoria boner, and says she is sounding like a bigot. 100% with Ethan on this. Ethan says that it isn't surprising Bella would be taking in reactionary right-wing bullshit hanging out with Natasha, who is established as a trad wife Catholic. He's spitting. Still. He then says, autogynephilia is a debunked conspiracy that reeks of transphobia and violence. That's 100% true.
That is true. Yeah.
Why would you have this character who we're supposed to think is bullshit this whole time say real shit like that?
Yeah.
That, to me, just reads that Bella does not believe that. That Amy does not believe that. Because Amy then says, it looks pretty real to me. And we're supposed to be siding with her.
Yeah.
Not until he says, now I'm gonna go live my truth and suck big black cock. Then it's like, oh, okay.
Well,
like,
yeah.
Honestly, in this scene, until he said that, I was 100% on his side. But because of the way the film is presented, I'm not supposed to be on his side. But he's written in a way that I was. So whose fault is that? Is that my fault for reading into it, or their fault for writing it badly?
No, yeah, I think it's poorly written. Like, if you want Ethan to be the villain, if you want him to read as like a sissy fetishist, you like just be clearer about it, because like he definitely reads that way, but then he says things like that where I'm like, I agree. You know, I don't think AGP is a real thing. I, of course, believe trans women are women. Like, don't have him, like, say those things. Or if you do, just, like, I don't know. Because, like, there's something to be said about, like, he's using that as a shield to, like, hide the fact that he's basically fetishizing her and the concept of being trans.
I don't think they really put that across well enough to make me 100% believe, like, unless you, like, without telling me 100% that is what he's doing, I didn't really get that.
Right. It requires so much paratext, because it's like you have to understand that just because he watches this like fucked up sissy hypno, which is bad, that he is a fetishist. And it's like, no, that actually is not a one-to-one, because, as I have said, I know trans women who that was like a pathway to cracking their egg. So you just have to be clearer about it. I think the craft was rough, and it comes from a person who considers meanness to be funny in all cases, and like to her detriment, I think. I do want to read like a few letterboxed reviews, one of which kind of agrees with what I'm saying, and the other is, you know, sort of disagrees with me, but I think has some worthwhile things to bring up. The first one here is also written by Chloe. I think this is Chloe Minzanin. I'm sorry if I mispronounced her name.
Okay.
It's a 4-star review. It says, the movie that has had a little corner of Twitter fighting ever since it was released. And I can understand why. It's very divisive, with a lot of quick interpretations coming from everywhere. Personally, audio mix aside, I loved this. It's easy to approach this as an embrace of Blanchard's typology. Very easy, actually. The, quote, it seems real to me is definitely a misfire, right? And a lot of people have been doing so, but at the same time, they're dismissing everything else that's going on here. They don't look beyond the usage of AGP, the misgendering of Ethan, the crassness of Bella and Natasha when talking about or to him. This is not a movie made to belittle girls early in their transitions, girls that are clocky or don't pass. It's not a dumbass HSTS versus AGP culture war. It talks about the very real fetishization that the girls go through when faced with a certain kind of men that will use them and their body as a vessel for their own self-discovery, denying their personhood and making them function as a stepping stone in their own lives. I think ignoring this issue and saying, quote, this movie is too mean, is not only showing your ass as to who you relate to in the story, but also have a little fun, girl. This movie is hilarious. Natasha ate that shit up every time it was her turn to speak. Even the visual choices being made here, including the very deliberate shade of red lipstick to give Ethan, cracking me the fuck up. Very, very camp. People have compared it to John Waters and Akari, but to me it was giving more Bruce LaBruce. Trans women's bodies and femininity are already overpoliced enough. Our edges and presentation are constantly sanded off, and this leaves out the very rough, problematic aspects of transition, the things the girls do, say, or go through. The bluntness, which is often hidden, needs to be shown as well. I don't care if it's bitchy or cunty or whatever. And that's actually a point that I do agree with, that like trans women don't always have to be like good, right? Which is why I'm like, fundamentally, I'm okay with the character of Natasha being kind of a bitch. Like, it's okay for a trans woman to be a bitch in a film. That's not my criticism. My criticism is that the film doesn't read properly.
The problem isn't that, oh, they're portrayed as bitchy. No, it's that they're portrayed as being bitchy and right. You can be a bitch in a movie, that's fine. But, like, the whole point is Natasha supposed to be this, like, she's, like, whispering in Bella's ear, this thing of, like, AGP is 100% bullshit, we know that. But the way it presents it in the movie is, no, it's not bullshit, she was right. To then lead to the point of the movie being AGP is a real thing. Like, this is what annoys me. I completely agree. Yeah, this is a thing trans women deal with, and it's an issue worth addressing. That doesn't shield the film from the criticism of how they dealt with it.
I agree.
We can't just say, oh, well, you can't criticize the way she did it because it's an important topic. No, you know, it is, but you could do it better. And knowing how much she believes in this kind of shit in real life makes it very hard to think that it was made in good faith.
It's okay for there to be, like, you know, bitchy, like, cunty, like, trans women in films. Like, not every trans woman has to be a perfect angel, right? But, like, you just have to be careful, I think, with the way that you characterize these people. And to like truly make sure that the audience understands what you're going for, right? Which is why I want to read this last part of this review from Chloe. I want to end this with a passage from the book Detransition Baby that really resonated with me and is perhaps a less harsh way to express the sentiment that this film is trying to convey for those who are still caught up on the aspect of the film. And here's the quote from Detransition Baby. Reese's dating practice prescribed that the only chasers you had to avoid were the crypto trans women, the ones who want to be women but are too closeted to handle it, and so they live their fantasies through you. You can feel it when you're with a crypto trans. A crypto trans has to evacuate you, your personhood, to use you to fantasize that he is you, getting fucked even as he fucks you. You're just a body for him to live through vicariously. It's the most alienating thing in the world. It's like being physically worn, like you're a glove. Reese fled at the first sight of a crypto-trans. She wished they'd just become ladies and stop being so weird. Like, if that's supposed to be the message of the film. And I think that's in there. I think it's in there. Obviously, Chloe got it. I didn't get it. So here's the difficulty that I'm having, right? And this is quite personal. When I was an egg, I did date a trans woman, like my girlfriend Natasha. It was rough, okay? Because I did understand this sort of sentiment. If I were to, like, come out, that might make our past relationship be reflected in a weird light. You know what I mean? Because it's like, oh, like, was I just with her to explore my gender, and now, like, you know, everything is fine now, right? And it's just like all the burden is on her to sort out what that means. But, you know, I mean, in my defense, I was very, like, conscious of this going in. And Natasha and I have known each other for a really, really long time. So, like, you know, we both knew each other as eggs. And there were moments that, like, you know, I was more ready to come out than she was. But when she came out, it actually held me back from coming out because I was worried that people would think I was copying her, you know, because we're like best friends, right? And then we started dating, and there was like a lot of other like issues with that. So that was part of the thing for me too, is like, I kind of did get this vibe, but like it hurt me because I was like, oh fuck, was I Ethan? You know? And I've talked to Natasha about this several times since transitioning, and, you know, we're still together and we do love each other very genuinely and very much. And you can fucking ask her, okay? She didn't feel like I was doing that. So that, I mean, that's helpful for my own, like, insecurities. But, like,
sure, I'm
also sympathetic to especially, like, straight trans women or trans women who, like, mostly date cis men, that I'm sure this is something that they experience a lot. Now, I haven't so far had any success with cis men, so, you know, maybe when I'm further in my transition, I guess, I'll get the joy of experiencing this. She said sarcastically. I can actually, like, understand the emotional and logic of that, right? It is a kind of dehumanizing, alienating thing for someone to explore themselves through their relationship with you, a living person who already had their own journey.
I think ultimately, now that I think about this and read along with that quote from Detransition Baby, I think this might come off like a compliment.
Look, you can hand it to Amy, okay? She sometimes cooks a little bit, okay?
Okay, what I'm about to say, I think it was overly ambitious to make a story like this a comedy. With how horrifying the experience sounds, and even just from side comments I've seen my mutuals make of experiences they've had in their DMs and on Grindr and stuff like that, yeah, it sounds fucking horrible. And I'm not trying to diminish that by siding with a fictional character in this movie. But ultimately, by perhaps someone more talented and skilled at writing a film could have maybe made this work.
Yeah.
But I think to make such a harrowing experience a comedy is a weird tug of war that really doesn't get you anywhere. Like, it's trying to pull you in two different directions. Like, we're supposed to viscerally hate Ethan for what he's putting his girlfriend through, but we're also supposed to be laughing at how he's acting at the diner and at the ending scene. Like, the big badum-tiss is that he was so worked up by the whole experience that he fucking came himself when he, like, went outside dressed as Cynthia, by the way, which I never caught.
I did not catch her name either.
This is following him spitting some real shit about autogonophilia being a debunked conspiracy. So it's so confusing and pulling you in so many different directions that ultimately, I don't think it puts any real message across as strongly as it would have liked.
Beyond the fact that this film hurt me very deeply, like the fact that it doesn't read properly is like the main criticism. I agree.
I wasn't even about to talk about like the dialogue the dialogue is terrible and that's worth pointing out, but like the audio mixing and the song composition, I was just like, you know what? Like I've seen bad movies. I can deal with a bad movie.
Yeah.
It's just a bad movie that makes me feel this fucking bad. Like that's what I'm going to talk about. I can excuse some bad mixing, because ultimately I actually had no trouble hearing the dialogue. And for me, most of the time, that was the problem because I would have rather not hear some of the shit they were saying.
It's rough. Well, I mean, what can I say? There's one more review that I'd like to read, which is a little bit longer, and it's kind of similar, but it hits on slightly different points. So this one is from Jane Brown. Being a transgender woman often puts me in a very awkward and uncomfortable social situations with men, eggs, and closeted or early stage trans people. I get to know just about any man, quote, on a deeper level, and he'll reveal he secretly has hangups about his gender and or orientation, and moreover, I am either the great bridge to the other side or a light to the road ahead. Every single time, without fail, such men turn out to crush on me or at the very least want to fuck me. To these men, the bridge to the other side is the bridge to their sexual fantasies. To these men, the light shines only at their own idealism. I'm idealized for being a trans woman because a trans person is their solution to all the problems that real members of each respective traditional gender brings. Man secretly feels at odds with other men because he is too plagued by the curse of performing masculinity in such rigorous manners, so he turns to a trans woman like me with admiration for giving up manhood and becoming a pretty girl as a result. Such a man projects his fantasies onto me. Fantasies either to transition or escape the trappings of gender imposed by society and himself. A man secretly has a hard time relating to cis women because they are too different. A trans woman like myself fits just right. Oftentimes, such a man also uses the prospect of queerness to relate to someone like me as a manipulative way to get into my pants. It doesn't work, of course, but I've seen the process happen so often. But yeah, that is real shit. And I think that like that is supposed to be what Ethan is. And maybe I'll rewatch this after I've, been transitioning longer and like been able to have my own experiences with cis men to more fully understand what this feeling is. Because right now, unfortunately, like it's just not happening for me, girl. I'm sorry. Sadly, it's not limited to men. Men often stray away from queerness in the public eye and even in their private life, choosing instead to lock themselves in Pandora's box. Those who more actively question their gender and actively intend to do something about their dysphoria or alternative gender afflictions by making some kind of change still exhibit comparable qualities as sad as it is to say. This is from my experience anyway. Some of these people successfully make a change and are better off for it. However, when they are in the early stage of transition, they turn to someone like me as a transition guide. I'm flattered, of course, but they do not consider how much pressure it puts on me. In addition to generalized idealization of a person like me, those who want me to help them along their journey simultaneously have an ulterior motive. They want to manipulate me into having sex. It's such a toxic behavior, and I want nothing to do with it. I'm not talking about organic crushes that develop. I'm talking about ulterior motives from trans people that leave me feeling used. They exploit my guidance as a way to wiggle their way into being closer to me, usually with the prospect of sex or romance. Eventually, the dam of idealization begins to break, and such people tend to toxically lash out at me. Rinse and repeat. Have you experienced that?
Luckily, no. People who have come to me for guidance in any sort of way have been very respectful. I think it's just the nature of, and we've talked about this before, the nature of trans Twitter that I think everyone's just trying to fuck, but I don't think that anyone has tried to use my kindness or my willingness to help them in their transition as a means to get closer to me for that purpose exactly. Have you?
There's been a few people. I stopped interacting with them, so if you're listening to this and worried that it's you and we interact, it's not you. It just felt like they were wanting more from me and wanting a deeper connection with me, where it's like, I'm sorry, girl, I don't know you, and like I'm just trying to help out another like person who's going through the same thing that I am, and I fear that it will only deepen. Like, and my experiences like that will only grow over time. So I can like definitely relate to that sentiment, though, I'm still gonna help out the girls. You know what I mean? And like, I still want to be friends with people. And like, sometimes I wish that people would recognize when I'm just being friendly and when I'm like, not wanting to like suddenly start flirting all the time.
I know both of us are very people-pleasy in that way, that we just want to help everybody, especially because we know how hard this is. Like, I've said it a million times, transitioning is the best decision I've ever made, but this shit is really fucking hard. And any help I can give to somebody going through the same experience, I'm more than happy to do. I'm not patting myself on the back here, but honestly, like, because I still don't understand this, because I'm only 2 years in. But when people fucking will, I might cut this out because it will sound like pat on the back, but when people fucking say that I'm inspirational, Siobhan, I almost fucking break down every goddamn time.
Yeah.
Like, it's honestly in the same way when you fucking... Oh, boy. When you... When you call me your big sister, okay? It's,
Babe, you're gonna make me cry.
It's just like... I'm just so happy that I can help you in those ways.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because there's a lot of days where it's really hard.
Yeah.
And to know that I can help somebody in that way it's very gratifying, because there have been a lot of times when I needed that myself and didn't always get it, because I have my own hang-ups about not really being able to reach out to people because I don't want to annoy people, so I don't want to scare people away. So I often worry that I might potentially cross some sort of boundary. Like we're talking about here, clearly a sort of parasocial situation.
Yeah.
Where someone could misinterpret someone's kindness and want more from that, not necessarily read the situation. So I totally get that.
Moth, I love you so much.
I love you too, Siobhan.
I'm not... Yeah, you're not scaring me away, okay?
Okay.
You have captured this money for life.
God damn it. You're way too fucking nice to me, Siobhan.
That's not true.
Okay.
I am nice to you because you are a good person, an inspirational woman,
Ugh.
and I love you, okay?
I love you too. And you're inspirational to me. I've said it a million times. I'll say it again. You're a driving force.
Yeah. Well, thank you, doll. I appreciate that.
I do want to say about the reviews, I think we can all be right on this. Because while you were reading the review and it's people saying, their very real experiences dealing with what Bella dealt with in the movie, we're doing the exact same thing, talking about how we see ourselves in how we're reading Ethan. It's not how he was intended to be read, but that's how we're reading into it. Because I'm hearing these reviews of people going on and on about their experience with men, and it's horrible, but it's not reflected in the film one-to-one,
Yeah. Exactly.
But we can both be right, is the thing. Like, I think it's beautiful that these people were able to get that out of this very, very mid film. You know, I saw this one thing that I was going to quote for a different reason, but someone was saying, why would you pay £20 to watch I Saw the TV Glow when you could stream Envy and Desire for free? I was originally going to say that both films are haunting to me, but for very different reasons.
That's fucking hilarious. But also, yeah, and my cunty response to that would be like, well, yeah, because Envy and Desire is worth the cost that you pay.
Yeah.
Am I right? No, I'm not right, actually, because like we're talking about this for multiple hours, so like clearly there's something in this film.
It definitely got something from us. But what I was gonna say was, and I'm not trying to spoil too much of I Saw the TV Glow, because eventually I want us to do an episode on it.
We should do an episode on that soon, yeah.
100%. A big point in the movie is what you get out of media, and whether or not how you interpret something versus what is really there. And I think that is definitely something that you can relate to Envy and Desire, because it's a very rushed 20-minute low-budget film, but the way that we were able to get our feeling and how these other people were able to get their feeling, I think we're all equally valid here. What annoys me is how dismissive Amy is towards our reads, and how Ethan's just supposed to be hateable. I don't know how anyone can see themselves in Ethan. It's like, what you're saying here is that you don't understand how anyone can deal with not passing, because it's such a foreign concept to you.
I just want to finish reading this review, because I think it kind of agrees with us in some ways, and I think is, you know, especially coming from someone who, in the same way that Chloe did, handed it to Amy and was like, you know, this is a topic worth discussing and worth making art about. But here we go. Okay. I'm probably too nice to how Ethan, a supposed autogynephile, is characterized. He's hardly different than the questioning straw man in Lady Ballers. The filmmaker's transness does not inherently absolve the film of criticism, but perhaps I was not particularly offended by Ethan's likeness, because the film's lead girls, also trans, are also stereotypically cunty doll-speak transsexuals. There's a moment where someone expresses even the slightest interest in transitioning, and they automatically write it off as a fetish. Even if they are right, were they not also once there as well? The girls are not innocent here. Nobody effectively engages with another person on their own terms, only on their own narcissism. It's a defense mechanism in part in response to being used, having their boundaries pushed, and expected to tolerate it. The issue with Ethan is a curious one. On one hand, I am not so quick to write off the experiences of autogynephilia altogether. There's a fetish for everything, and surely there's a fetish for wearing women's clothes. After all, I once worried that I was an autogynephile. It was a brief period, but I was aroused by my own mode of self-expression, and I take absolutely no shame in that. The stigma towards being aroused as I began cross-dressing made me question my own legitimacy. But such arousal was a short-lived rush of adrenaline as I lived as myself and felt hot doing it. I'm not an autogynephile, but I wish I were, because it sounds fun. Ethan is ultimately on the right path when condemning the true scum ideology, establishing a clear dichotomy of authenticity between quote-unquote real transsexuals and autogynephiles. Should we truly write off Ethan's initial boner euphoria as a sign he is not really trans? Or would doing so only validate true scum ideology? Does the film ultimately intend to gatekeep and dictate who is and who isn't authentically trans? Believe it or not, I don't really think so. That's not to say it doesn't do so anyway. I think the film is less interested in the absurd dichotomy of the transsexual authenticity so much as it is observing a fetishistic pattern that repressed men and some early trans people interact with trans women they pursue as guides and lovers. I do not think the director looks at Ethan as trans, as his journey with experimenting with gender concludes with him eventually accepting that he is a man with a specific kink. The kink in itself is not the issue. The problem in the film is how the man prioritizes the kink over his loved ones. Meanwhile, the problem with the film is that we are not given substantial reason to believe with certainty that Ethan is not trans. He may say that he's not in the end, but indecisiveness is part of the process of the type of men I mentioned. Denial is key. That was like so resonant with me, right? I denied for a long time, and it was hard. It had a lot of back and forth, to it. And while Ethan is a terrible person, I unfortunately still related to a lot of the things that he did and said.
It makes me wonder what Amy's transition was like. Not everyone has to transition the same. No one, there isn't one set of experiences we have to be valid. I understand that. But the way she views these experiences with such obvious disgust makes me very curious.
There's a real empathy problem with the film where it's hard to have characters that come across the right way because if you can only see the film through your own myopic lens, it's not going to be a good film. And there's 2 or 3 short paragraphs left in this Letterboxd review that I just want to finish because it's actually directly about this. So, furthermore, with his loved ones so eagerly embracing transmedicalist talking points, why would he necessarily feel so compelled to be honest with them about how he feels? Why do the transsexual dolls not consider accepting his gender journey sooner? Does a kink inherently refute femininity itself? The film intends to comment on toxic relationships and how trans women are exploited, and yet the film's commentary falls short. This is thanks to seemingly careless characterizations reinforcing harmless stereotypes surrounding gender transition, despite best efforts to say something different, and a trans feminine expression. I think the best films out there about transness seek to tear down gender dichotomies and hierarchies. Sadly, I think this one constructs them instead.
I agree with that 100%.
Yeah, spit. So yeah, fucking Envy and Desire.
Yikes. We did it.
We did it. We talked about it. Personally, I feel like I've exorcised a fucking demon from my soul.
I said that at the very top. We needed to do this. To go inside, folks, there was a very legitimate possibility and scare that we might have lost the audio.
Yeah.
Luckily, it doesn't seem like that happened. Unless it ultimately does sometime between now and then. I guess we'll see.
Yeah, if you're hearing this, congratulations, it worked.
Yeah, the planets aligned, the fates were in our favor. Even if we were not able to bring you this episode as intended, I think talking through our feelings and our interpretations through this film, because, surprise, surprise, folks, which is so funny, in an unintended conclusion here, despite how often Siobhan and I twin on so many things to the point where the name of the show 100% reflects that they is just like me, for real.
Yeah.
When it comes to when we talk about films, we differ a good bit. So that's fun.
Yeah, absolutely. But I like that because it's there's, when we talk about films, there's a little bit of a push and pull between us, which is kind of cool because it's I feel we have different perspectives. We also challenge each other to think deeply or differently about things.
I love
that.
I had one very strong feeling going into this, and there were points where you were bringing up a different point of view, and I felt the urge to either push back a little bit, but I think what's so patting ourselves on the back, what's so good about this podcast, Amy, despite everything you might be saying to the contrary, is that we build off on each other. We come into this thing thinking one way, and I think by the end we have a better understanding of not only each other's point of views and way we interpret it, but the project itself. So anyone who enjoyed this episode and would like to hear a future episode, please stick around. And we're so grateful that all of you lovely people enjoyed this show, regardless of what you were doing. If you were listening to us on the drive to work, if you were listening to us getting ready for work, if you were listening to us at work or unwinding after work, or if you don't work and you were just at home at any point in the day, let us know in the comments too what you were doing when you listened to the show, because I'm always curious about that.
Don't forget to like and subscribe.
Like and subscribe, please. Oh my goodness, my livelihood depends on it. My self-worth.
Okay, I have to go dig a hole tomorrow morning. I need to go to bed.
Okay, Siobhan, I will let you go and let you get some sleep, because it's 11 here. I need to sleep too. So
yeah, stay strong, bitches. Take it easy.